I think in the next couple of years, the thing that we're really seeing a lot is as UWB is gaining adoption in Wi-Fi 7 infrastructure, it's a little bit like when the ecosystem becomes more mature and you have more objects and devices that support UWB, the value becomes even greater because you now get this really connected ecosystem of devices that precisely know where they are relative to one another, and most importantly, relative to the user.
Hey, this is Martha DeGrasse here again for Wi-Fi Alliance, and this is The Signal, our podcast where we bring you the inside track on Wi-Fi. These are meant to be smart conversations with industry leaders. Today, we are very excited to talk about ultra-wideband and enterprise Wi-Fi with Shadi Hawawini. He is Director of Ecosystem Development at Qorvo. Shadi, thanks so much for being here today.
Martha, thanks so much for having me.
I think we're just going to start by learning exactly what ultra-wideband is.
It's a great question. Yeah, actually, ultra-wideband, or UWB for short, has been around for a very long time, really for almost 20 years. It started life largely in real-time location services. In real-time location services, you're using really the qualities of ultra-wideband, which is really for precision location, to track assets in, say, for example, industrial facilities, auto manufacturers, hospitals, and the likes. We really started to see a big amount of, I would say, adoption right around about 6 years ago when Apple released UWB in their handset, and then very quickly many Android vendors did as well. The use cases there were really revolving around what was called digital car key under the auspices of the Car Connectivity Consortium. And that really was a way for you to use your phone to automatically unlock your car door. It's a really great experience. And most importantly, and the reason why it was adopted, was not just for convenience, but also for security. The fact that you could not spoof it in the way that if you just used Bluetooth or another standard type of wireless technology, you could spoof it by, in effect, putting a man in the middle and repeating the signal. So UWB gives you that security by knowing, in a way that you can't spoof, how far away that distance is. And ultimately, really, the reason why ultra-wideband is so good for location is really in its name. It's in the fact that it is wide in the frequency domain, which means in the time domain, it's very narrow. And because you have these narrow pulses for UWB, it's very good for measuring the speed of light in effect. You're measuring when a wireless signal is beginning and ending. So you have a start and a stop. You're measuring the speed of light, and therefore you can measure distance. And with that, it is the only technology available that ultimately gives you room level precision. And with that room level precision, you can definitively say what side of the wall a particular, say, for example, asset is, or a phone. And with that, it enables a huge amount of use cases that we're really excited to talk about.
So what are some of the new use cases beyond asset tracking or digital car key that are coming along now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the big things that we're seeing, and it's really leveraging what's happening with Wi-Fi 7 and the deployments of UWB alongside Wi-Fi 7 access points, has to do with things like indoor wayfinding, where you actually can take all of the great experiences you have with, say, for example, Google Maps or Apple Maps and bring that to an indoor environment. We oftentimes have a booth at CES, and every meeting starts at least 10 to 15 minutes late. And inevitably, everyone apologizes because they just could not find our booth. And so we'll joke and say, well, if only there was a technology solution that solves that. Turns out there is with UWB. So that's really one of the great use cases we're excited about. But if you look at what some other more consumer-facing applications are looking at, there are things like auto audio handoff. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, if you're listening to music on your phone and you walk up to your speaker, you get a notification on your phone that asks if you want to transfer the music to the speaker. It creates this really seamless way of interfacing with technology in a way that you're not having to scroll through a bunch of menus, find the correct app and open it and figure out what you're doing. And so it's not just audio, it's lights, it's all of these different technologies. Really, it's a bit of an IoT play to create a lot of personalization when you have location and you know who the user is that's trying to interface with it.
And I think you've already got a couple of Wi-Fi vendors that have integrated this into their access points already, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the ones that are publicly released and they've made their announcements have been Cisco and Juniper. They were the first two who have released it publicly. But what I'll say is that really the majority of the industry is looking to adopt UWB alongside Wi-Fi 7. Really from the onset, our goal was to make UWB synonymous with Wi-Fi 7 because we've seen a trend for a while now, especially in Wi-Fi access points, where it's more than just providing connectivity. It's really providing a sensor hub, a way for you to actually aggregate sensor information in any environment and have it all together in one single infrastructure plane. And we see that as really being transformative because, to date, as I had mentioned before, UWB has been adopted in RTLS for a very long time. The challenge has traditionally been that to do those deployments, you have to actually install parallel infrastructure to all those Wi-Fi 7 APs. And so it's a significant amount of added cost, not just in the hardware, but in, say, for example, bringing an electrician to get on a ladder to plug in those anchors. But then also it's a pain for the IT administrators who have to now manage another IT plane and to make sure that it's secure, that there's no issues. And so the integration into Wi-Fi 7 we see as being transformational because it's greatly bringing down the cost and complexity of adding asset tracking and indoor location into really any environment.
And the Wi-Fi vendors that have added this already must have certain industries or enterprise verticals that they are particularly interested in selling into. I'm guessing like warehousing, or is it even more like wayfinding in malls? What do you think is going to be the number one enterprise use case?
It's a great question. And I'll say one of the really amazing things about this technology is it truly is generalizable in the sense that we do see high value, high ROI use cases across industries. The one that I think will be driving a lot of ROI, or really maybe will be the first one to start seeing adoption, is actually in hospitals. Oh. And hospitals they're actually a great example of combining both wayfinding as well as asset tracking. The other benefit of hospitals is it's a technology that can be used for staff, whether it's doctors, nurses, janitorial services, but also for the people, the consumers who visit the hospital. So one example is, say, for example, you have a crash cart. And these crash carts are distributed in hospitals with life-saving equipment on them. They're really instrumental because if someone is going into, say, for example, cardiac arrest or some other very serious health issue, doctors and nurses need to be able to locate this asset very, very quickly. So you can actually do asset tracking to monitor where the crash carts are at any time. If they, say, for example, need to be serviced, you can have the service crew come to them very quickly and efficiently. But you can also have doctors and nurses do wayfinding to get to that crash cart, and then from that crash cart go to where it's actually needed. And so it's combining, again, wayfinding and asset tracking, but it's very, very high value because it literally can save lives. If you're able to reduce minutes in terms of servicing someone who's gone into cardiac arrest, it really can save lives. So we're really excited about that. And then, of course, on the consumer side, if you go to your primary care check-in and you then need lab work, you can use an app on your phone to navigate from where your primary care physician is to the lab, to the parking lot. And so the advantage for me as a consumer, of course, is I'm taking time out of my day, out of work, to try to go as quickly as possible here. And so I want to minimize my time away from my office. And then for hospitals, it's highly valuable because there's efficiency gains to be had by enabling people to go from point A to point B as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And I think some of the more forward-thinking hospitals are already looking at augmented reality, virtual reality, even robotics. And I think that UWB has a role to play here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And robotics in particular is very interesting because robotics oftentimes relies on location. And the way that robotics typically get location is they'll do a combination of something like GPS if it's outside, but indoors they would be doing things like computer vision. And computer vision is really great. It's a great technology, but sometimes there are privacy concerns associated with it. There are challenges, of course, in low light areas. And so you have to then augment it with other sensors like LiDAR, but then they have their own trade-offs. And so one of the things that we're seeing an increasing amount of adoption in is actually robots adding UWB to leverage the Wi-Fi infrastructure so that robots will have an absolute location fix relative to that infrastructure, that they can also then do sensor fusion with computer vision or other sensing technologies to have something that's more responsive, works much better, and is just all around a better solution.
That's excellent. All right, and we haven't talked about AI yet, but I think that your UWB chip actually integrates AI on chip.
We do, yeah, and certainly I think no conversation is complete without talking about AI
I know.
these days.
I always
suppose.
say, like, how many minutes did we get into the podcast before somebody said AI?
Exactly. Well, I'll get it out of the way. AI. But, AI actually is, obviously has been around forever, and it is techniques that have been used actually in UWB for quite a while. We use AI in multiple ways. One of the ways that we use AI, and this is very unique to Qorvo, is when you're trying to measure the distance between multiple objects, there are line of sight conditions, which is very easy. There's no interferers. But then there are also non-line of sight conditions where, say, for example, you're communicating between walls, you have different interference. And that starts to become more difficult because it's very difficult to quantify the environment. Natively, UWB is a superior technology relative to narrowband radios, but there's always rooms to improve. And so we actually are applying some AI type functions to better indicate non-line of sight conditions and then to be able to compensate for those non-line of sight conditions. And what the result is actually means that you get more robust data measurements of location really in any environment without having to do a lot of post-processing. It sort of happens at the edge, and it means then that the location information you get is going to be accurate. The other thing that we see a lot of adoption on now, and one of the things that we're driving and innovating, is actually doing radar-like functionality using UWB. So UWB is not just for location in the sort of use case, if you will, of you have infrastructure and then you have tags and you have those working in concert with one another. But you can actually use UWB to enable radar-like functionality where you transmit and you receive at the same time. And when you receive, it's basically reflecting off of an object, and you can basically then calculate how far away that object is, again, doing radar-like functionality. And with that, we are seeing a lot of AI adoption at the edge, so algorithms running on our SoC. And the benefits there are really twofold. One, you're actually reducing the power consumption, because typically in an application, you'll have a very low power SoC like ours, and then you'll have a much, I would say, higher power, more powerful SoC that does a lot of, I would say, the more hardcore algorithms. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to do a lot of the processing just on our chip and keep that main power-hungry chip turned off for longer. So there's a significant amount of power savings to be had there. It also really simplifies a lot of the algorithmic development and the system development by having the algorithm on chip, and it also reduces latency in making inferences. So there's a significant amount of benefits of adding AI to the edge. And with this, what we've actually been able to demonstrate, both with our algorithms, but also with partner algorithms, is using radar to be able to do things like occupancy and people counting. So in an enterprise access point environment, that's really important if you're tying it into the building management system or the BMS. So you can determine, say, for example, how many people have walked into a room. And because you're tied into the HVAC, you can proactively apply that knowledge of how many people there are, because you're going to know how quickly the room is going to heat up ahead of actually measuring the temperature heating up. But you can also use it for health. You can use it for doing things like breathing detection, heart rate detection. And really the benefit there is, instead of using computer vision and using cameras to do this, where there are significant privacy concerns, and especially for health type applications, that's a really big concern. You can do this in sort of an anonymized way. So again, there's like these really great innovations that are happening, and a lot of them are enabled by having AI at the edge and having UWB integrated with Wi-Fi 7.
So these AI algorithms are not just about UWB and location tracking. They do other things as well, like counting the people, detecting the breath. And it sounds like there might be more ahead that these algorithms are going to be doing right on your chip.
Yes, exactly. So doing things like breathing rate and heart rate is really quite difficult because ultimately when you're measuring breathing rate, as an example, you're trying to measure the rise and fall of one's chest. But if that person is moving or the object that is monitoring them is moving, how do you actually sort of separate the signal from the noise? And so AI really helps in doing that, and it creates these, I would say, highly optimized but also simplified algorithms that can run at the edge to really, again, simplify the deployments.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are there any other AI use cases that you see in the future that your chips might be able to help with?
Well, so there's always the question of additional use cases that can be enabled in UWB. We're starting to see the emergence of UWB also being used for things like audio streaming and data comms. And with that, then there's also a lot of opportunities for applying AI for things like audio, noise cancellation, and the likes. Those are a little bit further off. The ecosystem really needs to mature there. But there are certainly a lot of uses that we do foresee related to UWB.
Okay, great. Is there anything else specific for UWB that we should be on the lookout for in the next couple years?
Well, I think in the next couple of years, the thing that we're really seeing a lot is as UWB is gaining adoption in Wi-Fi 7 infrastructure, it's a little bit like when the ecosystem becomes more mature and you have more objects and devices that support UWB, the value becomes even greater because you now get this really connected ecosystem of devices that precisely know where they are relative to one another, and most importantly, relative to the user. And so we do see that the growth is just starting, and ultimately we're going to see a lot more sort of personalized experiences being enabled rather because of UWB. If I maybe pivot a little bit into consumer, we see UWB being adopted in consumer really starting in the phone. As I mentioned, digital car key and automotive is a really nice use case, but it does require you to have a brand new car rather, and that's not always going to be the case. But in the home, we're seeing now adoption in smart door locks, in lighting, as I mentioned before, in audio bars. And so you can now imagine a world where you have your phone, you walk into your home, the door lock knows that you are actually walking towards the door, so it automatically unlocks when you get in front of the door. You open the door, you close it, it knows you're behind the door, so it locks the door behind you automatically because that's what your app personalized settings said that you wanted. Because it knows that I'm now inside the house, similarly, I can have custom and personalized lighting settings. Say, for example, I have a particular color temperature and brightness that I like in the house that perhaps is different than my wife's personalized settings. So now the lights automatically know I've walked into that house, and it can turn on the lights with a certain level of brightness, a certain color temperature. As I mentioned before, I'm listening to Spotify or some other music streaming service. I walk up to the sound bar and it says, hey, do you want to now transfer the music to here? Without having to scroll through 10 different menus, I can easily just click yes because I had a notification pop up on my phone. So, again, as we see more adoption, we're going to see more of these really unified personal experiences that get me really excited. Specifically to the enterprise, for Cisco, Juniper, and the many others who are now adopting UWB, we're really going to see asset tracking becoming ubiquitous. Even before the adoption in Wi-Fi 7, we were seeing a massive amount of adoption because it's very high ROI. And we now expect that to really continue to grow because the investments to actually deploy UWB are trending to zero. And now it's really a matter of just adding some very, very low cost tags to monitor assets. And then as we begin to see wayfinding more ubiquitously available on mobile phones, then we'll be able to see both benefits in, again, really any environment, whether it's hospitals, manufacturing, warehousing, retail. We're seeing a lot of interest. So, we're incredibly bullish. We're really excited for the future. And we're really excited to see UWB becoming really ubiquitous as the de facto choice for doing location services.
Yeah, it sounds like it will be. You mentioned retail. If the tags are super low cost, could they be on items like in a big box store so that you walk into a store and your phone can show you where the item you're looking for is in the store?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way that most people have envisioned it today is twofold. One is if you go to a Home Depot, for example, they have everything merchandised really well. And so they have their facilities very well mapped. And so you can use your phone to do wayfinding to then go to that item. The benefit to Home Depot is if you, say, for example, have downloaded Home Depot's loyalty app, they can, of course, push specials to you when you go by a particular area, but they then also know where you're walking by, so they can do a better job of merchandising. We can also see use cases where UWB gets integrated into, say, for example, the security sensor of a device, where not only will someone like a Home Depot or others know when someone has tried to take this secured device outside of the store, but they'll know its journey throughout the store, and they can actually do some predictive analytics to really maybe predict that someone's maybe not a good actor with this device, and they can flag staff to go to where that device is. The benefit of the security sensors is it's not as cost pressured, because ultimately the cost of a UWB tag is going to be on par with a BLE tag. So you're looking at anything from $10 to $25. It's not going to be like RFID where it's in pennies. But even with that, you can add it to, security sensors and the likes.
Okay, that's great information to have. All right, Shadi Hawawini, Director of Ecosystem Development at Qorvo. Thank you so much. This has been a really good conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
And that is our show. You can get the signal straight to your device through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or of course at the Wi-Fi Alliance. That's y-fi.org. I'm Martha DeGrasse here for the Wi-Fi Alliance. Thank you so much for listening. Please join us next time on The Signal.